Okay, thank you for joining us back here again, where we are working on a project to try and save democracy. And of course, for this project, we've been going over all of the baseless claims that have happened over the election. And they're all baseless. The first video was about the Secretary of State of Georgia and his phone call with the Trump attorneys. I tried to cut Trump out of that as much as possible. The second video was about people giving testimony on the floor of the legislative branch of government. Well, they weren't actually in the Capitol building, but they held a legislative hearing in a hotel, and people gave testimony. Obviously, all sorts of baseless claims and conspiracy theories. And then I played Georgia's Secretary of State's attorney talking to Georgia about what happened with the elections, and you can make up your own mind about the kind of comments he made on it from the records that he has. Today, we're going to listen to Phil Klein, and just to be full disclosure, Phil Klein was the Attorney General of Kansas. He was also a state legislature. But, full disclosure, he lost his bar license because, to my understanding, he was too heavy-handed prosecuting abortion clinics. And that's just to my understanding. Now, there is a gentleman up in North Carolina. His name's Greg Newman. They allowed him to keep his bar license even after he lied to the state court, the Bar Association, the North Carolina Commission that investigated him. And they investigated him for allowing a child rapist to walk, a lot like Alex Acosta. But they decided, what he did, it's okay. He can keep his bar license. He can stay in that position. So let's hear what this gentleman has to say. I'm sure he just has a lot more baseless claims on the whole election stuff as well. But I'd still like to hear it. So without further ado.
What do you mean exactly by purchase election officials?
Well, they told them exactly what to do this election. In the grants and the agreements of the grants, which we were able to obtain, initially we couldn't get this because CTCL and Mark Zuckerberg are private. If it was government doing it, there's transparency. There has to be a budget. There has to be hearings. But instead, this was a private entity that refused to share information with us. And so we got some documents pursuant to court order. And they show in the grant agreements, like, for example, Philadelphia, it dictated how many satellite polling locations Philadelphia will have. And 800 is what it told them. And if you don't do it, we're going to take back our money. They actually dictated to them how much they were going to send, the number of polling places, and what they would be used for, and how many funds, how much monies would be dedicated to that, and their title. And that's significant. As just one example. Philadelphia, or Pennsylvania, as all states do, they require both parties to be present in the counting room. That's common sense. Because in the counting room, these election inspectors, as they're called in some states, or poll workers, are actually completing ballots or filling out ballots for people who aren't there. There are many reasons why a ballot can't be read by the machine. And the law says that if it can't be read, like it might be torn or the coffee stain or the paper crinkles or whatever, that these folks actually complete the ballot for that person. They'll look at the ballot and they'll say, well, they voted for Biden here, so I'm going to put Biden, and they voted on down, and then they cast the new ballot and count it. So the only way to prevent fraud is to have both parties there as such a conduct is engaged in. So every state has that requirement. But in Pennsylvania, the satellite offices, the law requires a Republican in the polling place. And the grant defines satellite offices as doing the same work as the polling place, but they are to be called satellite offices. And that allowed the Democrats in Philadelphia to say, this is not a polling place, so the law doesn't require a Republican to be there.
Okay, now I'm going to play that attorney again. This is just a short clip, but he's talking about the mobile polling buses that the state legislature was asking him about. And this is really interesting when you hear what Phil Klein just had to say. So let's check this out.
The fact that the polling place is contained within this bus, I think does raise some concerns. You can't park the bus anywhere. It's still got to be in an approved polling place or approved early voting location. If it was not, then that would not be a legal location.
Okay, so just with what he just said, it still has to be at an approved polling location. And I don't know about Georgia. I don't know. But from Phil Klein and his statements, it appears that those buses could have been moving around and they could have been satellite of the approved polling places that the legislature of the state set up to actually have legal and lawful votes at. So let's kind of follow the story a little bit more.
Kicked Republicans out. In Michigan, it worked this way. Zuckerberg money consolidated the counting center. So instead of having a ward where 5 people get in a room and they do this process of checking the ballots and so forth, they put it into what's called the TCF Center, which is an abandoned former ice hockey arena, the size of 2 football fields. They had 134 counting tables there. And they claim they had to do this because of COVID. So they're creating a crowd because of COVID. And then they had a Republican, the Michigan law says a Republican must be in the place of the counting. And they said, yeah, the Republican's in the place. He or she is in the cheap seats. And they can't see what's going on these 134 counting tables. So Zuckerberg money went in there and dictated the manner in which they were going to do this, and the manner allowed them to kick one party out of the counting facilities. And that's wrong. That's illegal. Another thing it did, with consolidated counting centers, you suddenly had reasons to drop off hundreds of thousands of ballots in one location. And these drop boxes were put out. Now, just to give you an example of the impact of the drop box, I go to Delaware County, Pennsylvania, Democrat stronghold. There was one Zucker box, is what we call them, for every 4 square miles. That's 2 miles by 2 miles square. In other words, you could take a stroll and vote. Plus, there are all these satellite locations. In the 59 counties that President Trump won in 2016, there's a drop box for every 1,159 square miles. So in Republican counties, Pennsylvania told Republicans, go on a weekend vacation and find Waldo. And in Democrat counties, we'll come by and pick up your ballot for you. That's wrong. Government should not be engaged in suppressing the vote of one demographic and trying to turn out another demographic. America tried that before in the Deep South. It was a Democratic strategy around the turn of the 20th century, and it focused on suppressing the black vote and turning out the white vote. This time it was suppressing the Republican vote and turning out the Democrat vote. And it's wrong in either case.
Okay, what I would like to point out that he didn't really point out is how much of this Zuckerberg money, I like his little Zucker box, but how much of the Zuckerberg money went to actually paying employees, actually paying people at the polling, and staffing people to be at the polling. And I just wish to point that out real quick, because he doesn't really talk about that as much as he talks about how much it just financed these boxes, the satellite stuff, this, that, and the other. So, let's see what else he has to say. Because so far, a lot of this has kind of been what's happened in Georgia as well. We've gotten confirmation of this from other places. So let's see if we can find something new. I'm looking for something new. And maybe dealing with a different state other than Georgia or Pennsylvania.
And these governors have been hostile to meetings. And an example is Michigan. In Michigan, a couple of things have happened. First of all,
Different
the Attorney
state.
General, the chief law enforcement officer of the state, I had that role in Kansas, threatened legislators who didn't agree with her on the election result with criminal investigation and prosecution.
Well, that kind of sounds undemocratic.
That type of intimidation and threat should never happen in America from the state or a chief law enforcement officer. Secondly, Governor Whitmer actually claiming COVID and then changing it and saying there was a threat, which was denied by the state police, who said there was no threat that they were aware of, mobilized 200 state police officers to surround the Capitol building in Michigan on December 14th. And they disabled Republicans from entering. Now, Democrats were able to enter the building, and they entered the building and certified their electors on that date. But Republicans, not a one, was allowed in the people's chamber. The governor shut down the legislature. That doesn't happen. Kings and queens shut down parliament. Governors don't shut down legislatures. And that is a significant problem. And we are bringing suit over those issues.
Well, I mean, that is a significant claim. I wonder if there is any evidence to prove his claim. Because if that were true, I would imagine that the FBI would be all over that for state corruption. I mean, if the Bar Association's going to take his license because he was a little too harsh on abortion clinics, I would imagine that if a governor ordered police not to allow Republicans in to do their constitutionally delegated duties, I would imagine that the FBI would be all over it, and we would have heard about it somewhere. It would have probably been the New York Times or the Nightly News, something. I have a hard time believing that this is true. Let's see if we could search the internet and find any evidence of this going on.
Well, the electors are also, the GOP electors are also on the governor's certificate of ascertainment.
I'm not going to get into a political debate. I'm following
It's not a
orders.
political debate.
Okay.
It's the official sealed document, the certificate of ascertainment.
I'm following orders.
The GOP electors,
Just like the Nazis.
They're trying to do their constitutional duty.
I understand.
And their constitutional duty requires them to be at the Senate chamber today at 2 p.m.
Okay.
They're here.
All right, they're not. I understand they're not being permitted in. If you have a problem, you can contact the governor's office, the Speaker of the House, the Senate Majority Leader, or.
I saw the governor's press release this morning that said due to COVID. Is that the reason being given?
No.
All right, that was what the press release said. Is there another reason why?
You'd have to ask the governor's office to answer that question. I don't have.
We
any
have a
knowledge.
copy of paperwork that was prepared as electors under their constitutional duty. Can I speak to the Sergeant of Arms of the Senate to deliver it to the chamber today?
He's in a meeting right now with the Electoral College. He's not available to meet.
Captain Green, is it Captain?
First Lieutenant Green.
First Lieutenant, can you deliver this?
I cannot.
Okay. Is there anyone here that's willing to allow us, I've got elected officials and electors,
Okay.
to deliver this to the Senate today at 2 p.m.?
Okay. I can ask the Senate Majority Leader, the House Majority Leader, and
Senator Mike Shirkey, would
Okay.
you deliver that to him?
I-
Tell him Ian Norton.
you
is
can
trying to
contact his
deliver
office
paperwork?
directly and make arrangements to drop that off to him, sir. I'm not
Well,
going
they're
to
not.
take anything.
You're not letting us in the building. His office is inside.
He's not here.
What's that?
He's not here.
So are you telling me that the Senate chamber is in session and the Senate leader's not here?
Yeah. So you'd have to contact his office to make arrangements to meet with him to turn over any
Somebody
paperwork,
from the
sir.
governor's team that's running this? Is
You'd have
she
to
willing
contact the governor's office with their team to make arrangements for them to.
All right, again, the electors by statute, it's statute MCL 168.47, have to be at the Senate chamber today
Okay.
at 2 p.m. They're trying.
I'm telling you that they're not going to be allowed to enter the Capitol, sir.
All right, thank you, Lieutenant.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Wow. Wow. That man, that officer, under orders, following good orders, just told the state legislatures that they could not enter the state capitol. That man told him what statute applied to allow the state legislatures to enter the capitol. Nothing. Nothing. He wouldn't do it. He was following orders. And this is incredibly troubling because that's not a democracy. That's not how a democracy works. And if you wish to have a democracy for your children, you should be incredibly concerned. Incredibly concerned. That's not conjecture right there. That is a video from December 14th of a police officer telling the GOP elected officials that they couldn't come in to the building where they have constitutional duties to perform and uphold. Wow.
That alone should call into question these late night ballot dumps that occurred in the urban core with the work stoppages that have never happened before. You don't stop counting. You only stop counting so one side can learn how many ballots they need to make up the difference. That's the only reason to stop counting. And all of these urban core areas at certain times had ballot counting stoppages. And then loads of ballots came through the door. So there's a lot of concern about the integrity of this election, and Congress and state legislatures ought to step up to the plate.
Is it actually true that it has never happened before that the counting stops? I mean, I find that hard to believe.
Well, there was one time it stopped that I'm aware of. This was pre-machine, pre-everything, and it was the Senate Democrat primary in Texas with Lyndon Baines Johnson running against a popular former governor, Coke Stevenson. And suddenly it stopped, and Johnson was behind by a handful of votes, and they couldn't find ballot box 13 in one small city along the southern border of Texas. And when they finally found it, it had just enough votes in it for Lyndon Johnson to overtake Stevenson and win the primary. And I guess coincidentally enough, all of those voters in that one precinct voted in alphabetical order. They all had the same penmanship, had the same pen, and all voted for Johnson. So yes, we've had a ballot counting stop before. And the result was Johnson stole the Senate seat. They're not allowing it. It doesn't cost too much to have a risk-limiting audit grabbing actual ballots and grabbing the envelopes and doing forensic analysis of the ballots. There's a lot that can be determined, whether it was completed by a machine or a human hand and so forth. They're not allowing it. They're not allowing the simple steps to take place to ensure that this election was conducted with integrity. And instead they're saying, trust us. Even though we kicked you out of the counting room, even though we took private money, even though we sidestepped state laws and ignored other laws, and we broke the chain of custody of the ballot, trust us. Our guy won, and there's no fraud going on here. I'm sorry, that's evidence that needs to be investigated.
That's real interesting because, that's basically what I heard on the phone call when Trump's lawyers were talking to the Secretary of State. Oh, you don't have the correct numbers. We do. Well, can we get in and see them? No, you can just trust us. Well, how do we know the numbers are real? Well, I'll just have my attorneys talk to your attorneys. And after that, you can just trust us. You can just trust us. Is this an open and transparent government? Because, I know that all of these claims are baseless. I know that they're absolutely fraudulent. I know that we're all conspiracy theories for even listening to them. We're all just conspiracy theorists just because we heard it. But my most favorite of all time baseless claim is the fact that the police stopped the GOP from getting into the state legislative branch of government, into the state capitol. That is my icing on the cake for these baseless claims. So let's hear what he thinks is the most profound thing, like what he believes we should do absolutely first and foremost, what the most important thing to do looking into all of these baseless claims. Let's check this out.
The range of evidence that's out there that there were significant irregularities. I think, Peter Navarro has a report that kind of summarizes a lot of that recently. What do you think is the most compelling? What do you think is the thing that really needs to be addressed first?
Well, honestly, it's the hiding of the evidence. There's absolutely no reason for it. And that shows intentional conduct. When you're destroying evidence, when you're not releasing information, when you're not being transparent, that is evidence of your intent and your fear. So I've never investigated a person who was innocent and controlled information of their innocence who didn't want me to see it. And I've never investigated a person who was guilty who wanted me to see the evidence of their guilt that they controlled. That's pretty basic.
I would say that is really basic, and that's one of the things that's the most concerning to me, is how untransparent and how much one side is fighting to say, well, you just can't see it, you got to trust us. I mean, down in Arizona, the elections board wouldn't allow the legislature to do an audit of the computers. They wouldn't allow an independent audit. Down in Georgia, they basically have problems about the same type of stuff. And again, they're telling, hey, just trust us, just trust us. In Michigan, the governor went as far as to order the police to keep Republicans out of the Capitol, the state Capitol, out of their place of work. This is pretty insane, and it should be concerning to every single American. I'm not Republican, I'm not Democrat. I don't even vote, and this is scaring the crap out of me. It really is. Let's see what's next.
Of course, they reacted and discussed what happened in the United States on the 6th of January, the storming of Capitol Hill, the halls of Congress. They also discussed what happened in the aftermath, in the days after, when Donald Trump was removed from Twitter, for example. Other conservative personalities and figures muzzled online on various platforms, as well as applications where conservatives, millions of people communicated with each other, were removed from Google's store and Apple's own store.
The current president, who got the votes of almost 75 million Americans, as well as his supporters, was stripped of a fundamental right, freedom of speech. Their access to voters through the largest social media platforms was blocked. Why did that happen? Because of a court decision? No. Yet only a court could have taken such a decision. It's the opponents of the president who stand behind this decision, and this is nothing but a violation of the basic rights and freedoms of US citizens.
Reacting to these bans and these removals, many leaders, European leaders, for example, Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, they voiced alarm, they voiced concern and worry that the power of these tech giants, as well as symbolism behind what they did, muzzling an elected president, no less, that this, is a worrying sign. And here the Russians also pointed out the irony of the United States experiencing what it had actively and happily exported for many years, which is coups and revolutions, where they painted those who stormed parliaments and marched on government offices as freedom fighters and heroes.
What do you mean exactly by...
Okay. I mean, that's really interesting. And I know, because I've heard the chatter online, I've heard the debates where people are like, well, Twitter is a private company. They can make decisions on who they wish to have on their platform. Facebook is a private company. They can make decisions on what they wish to have on their platform. And I'm going to tell you right now, yeah, that's true. But there's also really, really good law and really, really good case law to say they can't silence political talk. Okay, so for an example, if there's a politician running for office and I don't like him, and I have reasons not to like some of the things that he's talking about, if I get on his Facebook page and I express my dislike, not violently, not suggesting some type of violence, but I just express my dislike for what he's doing and what he's talking about and give an alternative view, they can't silence that. They can't mute that. They're not supposed to. And that's exactly what they did with the president. And the reason that this is so concerning is because when you start allowing them to take the freedom of speech, the freedom of speech that they're going to take is going to be yours next. And this has happened over and over again throughout history. You can just look at the Bolshevik Revolution. And I think it's incredibly telling that even the Russians are stepping back and saying, wow, look at what's going on in the United States. We can all condemn what happened at the Capitol on January 6th. It shouldn't have happened. There was no point to it happening. There was nothing that was going to come out of it except for what actually did. But we need to actually look and see what's going on in our government. We have to force the government to be transparent. Because if we don't, we're not going to live in a democracy anymore. We're not going to live in a democracy anymore. And even though those companies like Facebook and Twitter and those various tech companies that silenced Donald Trump, even though, yeah, they're private companies, they can do it. Let me tell you something about that. The United States government allows them to exist. They have a charter that has opened and allowed their company to be able to do business within the states. So the government has the power and the authority to shut them down. That's what antitrust violations are all based around and talking about. So just think about that. Because right now, especially with COVID and everybody at home, the internet is really the only way of speaking. So if they can silence you on the internet, there really isn't free speech. Anyways, we all know that all of these claims are baseless and we have nothing to worry about. And, I mean, it's official. Joe Biden's president. There's nothing we can do about that now. But if you wish to have a democracy, a real democracy, and you believe that we live in a democracy or a republic, then you should pay attention to what's going on. Anyways, I am just conspiracy. And I just wish to conspire with the good people of this planet to leave a better world for future generations than the world we all grew up in. If you wish to join in on this conspiracy, like, comment, share, and be a part of it. One world love and peace.
Well, the electors are also, the GOP electors are also on the governor's certificate of
All right,
ascertainment.
I'm not going to get into a political debate. I'm following
It's not a
orders.
political debate.
Okay.
It's the official sealed document. The certificate of ascertainment has also the GOP electors. They are here. They're
Okay.
trying to do their constitutional duty.
I understand.
And their constitutional duty requires them to be at the Senate chamber today at 2 p.m.
Okay.
They're here.
All right, and they're not, I understand they're not being permitted in. If you have a problem, you can contact the governor's office, the Speaker of the House, the Senate Majority Leader, or
I saw the governor's press release this morning that said due to COVID. Is that the reason being given?
No.
All right, that was what the press release said. Is there another reason why?
You'd have to ask the governor's office to answer that question. I don't have.
We
any
have a
knowledge.
copy of paperwork that was prepared as electors under their constitutional duty. Can I speak to the Sergeant of Arms of the Senate to deliver it to the chamber today?
He's in a meeting right now with the Electoral College. He's not available to meet.
Captain Green, is it Captain?
First Lieutenant Green.
First Lieutenant, can you deliver this?
I cannot.
Okay. Is there anyone here that's willing to allow us, I've got elected officials and electors,
Okay.
to deliver this to the Senate today at 2 p.m.
Okay. I can ask the Senate Majority Leader, the House Majority Leader, and
Senator Mike Shirkey, would
Okay.
you deliver that to him?
I-
Tell him Ian Northen.
you
is
can
trying to
contact his
deliver the
office
paperwork?
directly and make arrangements to drop that off to him, sir. I'm not
Well,
going
they're
to take
not.
anything.
You're not letting us in the building. His office is inside.
He's not here.
What's that?
He's not here.
So are you telling me that the Senate chamber is in session and the Senate leader's not here?
Yeah. So you'd have to contact his office to make arrangements to meet with him to turn over.
All
any
right, somebody
paperwork,
from the
sir.
governor's team that's running this. Is
You'd have
she
to
willing
contact the governor's office with their team to make arrangements for them.
All right, again, the electors by statute, it's statute MCL 168.47, have to be at the Senate chamber today
Okay.
at 2 p.m. They're trying.
I'm telling you that they're not going to be allowed to enter the Capitol, sir.
All right, thank you, Lieutenant.
You're welcome. Thank you.